very confused, very sad. I just want my daughter found so we can take her home. That's all we want to do is find my daughter and take her home.
That was the mother of missing person, Nicole Mallatt. Nicole is actually a mother herself with several children. This is a case that has me wondering, is law enforcement taking the right approach with it? Is this really a missing persons case, or is this a homicide investigation that just hasn't been properly identified yet? The family certainly seems to be worried that the worst case scenario might be what's going on here. After looking into it, I kind of have the same feeling that they do, but let me share the information that I found with you and see what you guys think. It's time to turn on the searchlight for Nicole Mallatt. Welcome to another episode of Brainscratch Searchlight. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. Before we get into the story of Nicole Mallatt, we do have a quick Searchlight update to give you guys. Jumping over to DurhamRegion.com, Benjamin Everson, 31, was reported missing in the summer of 2019. Of course, we featured him on Searchlight after his mother reached out asking for some help. He was last seen leaving a family member's residence on July 11th. Police confirmed that testing done at the Center of Forensic Sciences have confirmed remains found March 29th in the area of Davis Drive and Regional Road 1 were those of Everson. Foul play is not suspected, said police on Monday. So, his mother reached out to me. I asked her if there's any memorial donation options that we have at this time. I haven't heard from her yet. If I do hear about something along those lines, I'll be sure to pass them on to you guys. And of course, we're going to make a donation to that as well. It's heartbreaking whenever families hit this conclusion in these missing person investigations. And I just want Kim to know that we're all out here thinking about you, and we're very sorry that your family is faced with this at this time. And of course, if there's anything we can do, you know how to get a hold of me. So that is it on the Ben Everson case. But let's go ahead and continue with today's case. Nicole Mallatt. Here is a picture of Nicole. There's something about this case that worries me. I know that we've had a lot of cases lately where domestic violence seems to be a component of them. This one is no exception. I've recently done a podcast interview that kind of touches into some domestic violence issues. Of course, we had an episode of Brainscratch a few weeks ago with several experts, and I've put a whole new page together over at brainscratchers.com specifically to help people with domestic violence issues. Of course, it features that episode of Brainscratch, but it has a lot of other information there about identifying if you're in one of those situations, links to resources that can help you with that. So I'll have a link to that in the description box down below, but this case really worries me on that front. Let's see if you guys get the same feeling as we continue to go through this. Starting at NamUs, I'm thankful that there is a profile for Nicole. Date of last contact, they have listed here as November 25th, 2019. The information that I'm seeing actually says November 26th. That is only a few days before Thanksgiving, and that's part of why the family is so caught up on something bad must have happened to her. She has several children. She was speaking to family members about plans that she had for Thanksgiving, and then all of a sudden she goes missing a few days before it. Missing from Rich Hill, Missouri is what they have noted here on the profile. Let's just jump to the map real quick. So this Southwest County Road 3508, this is a road that their home, it's actually a big plot of land. There's over 200 acres that they were living on, but they live right off of Southwest County Road 3508. If we zoom out a little bit, you can see there's a bunch of neighboring kind of neighborhoods here. New Home, Foster. These are really small communities, only with a few hundred people each. The nearest kind of bigger town is Butler, and that is over here. So quite honestly, I don't know what the name for this specific area where their land is. And like I said, it's a big chunk of land, so it might even straddle across more than one of these kind of smaller town regions. But this is the area that we're looking at, and from the estimates I'm seeing, I mean, we're not talking more than a few thousand people that live in this immediate vicinity, even including Rich Hill down here. So let's go ahead and continue with the NamUs profile. 36 years of age. We've got a Caucasian white female. Stands at 5 foot 3 inches tall, weighs 120 pounds. And we can see the NamUs case created very quickly. I'm just always thankful when that happens. I don't know if Missouri is one of the states. There's several states now where there's actually laws in place that are forcing NamUs entries to happen. So it could be that Missouri is one of those states. For circumstances of disappearance, not much to go on. Nicole Mallatt was last seen on November 25th, 2019 in Rich Hill, Missouri. For hair color, they say blonde or strawberry, blue eyes, distinctive physical features, none noted. And it's weird because in some pictures, I see something that looks like it might have been a lip piercing that she had kind of on her lower left side. I don't know if it is or not. I'm just seeing an object in there in some photos. I do want to say I've seen other photos of her where she looks like she could fluctuate in weight a little bit, and I don't know if this is the most current photo. To me, it kind of looks like a driver's license picture. I always think that when I see the blue background. Here's a photo of her from a news segment where you see it looks like she might have a little more weight on her. Here's another photo of her as well. So this picture that's on the NamUs profile is the one that's circulated the most, so I'm just hoping that it's kind of the closest to she was looking at the time of her disappearance. For clothing and accessories, black shirt, jeans, and a backpack. And that's about it. So NamUs is saying this takes place in Rich Hill, Missouri. Rich Hill is a city in Bates County, Missouri, and is part of the Kansas City metropolitan area within the United States. The population was 1,396 at the 2010 census. So I'm telling you that even with those smaller communities that are kind of closer to where her home is, we're not even talking, I don't even think you get over 2,000 people with those communities, unless possibly if you include Butler. Apparently, Rich Hill is also the name of a documentary that came out in 2014 about this area, which is about 3 teenage boys struggling with family poverty and looming adulthood. Looks like it won an award at the Sundance Film Festival, but I'm not seeing anything really for crime statistics or anything like that. Just looks like kind of a rural area. And if we kind of dive in a little bit on the road, you can see, I mean, there is just not much for structures around here. Kind of the occasional house here and there, and then just wide open land. And it's like that. I mean, it's literally miles where it's just land. With kind of spotty neighborhoods in there. You do see, if you zoom in on Foster, it kind of looks like a neighborhood division that was built out there. For the new home area, it's very rural. And of course, that's going to raise its own challenges in terms of searches. But that's one of the good things about this case is the local sheriffs kind of kicked off an emergency alert that pulled in a bunch of other resources. And for that first week where her missing persons report was filed, it did take a couple days before the report got filed. It seems like the search is very intensive. And it has a lot of different resources. Let's go ahead and learn a little more about it over at ksdk.com. Search underway in Missouri for missing 36-year-old mother. This was posted December 4th, 2019. Dive teams, boats, drones, and police dogs are searching in Missouri for a missing mother. There was an interview with the sheriff, and he was also speaking about the fact that they have had cadaver dogs out around that area as well. The Bates County Sheriff's Office said in a Facebook post that 36-year-old Nicole Mallatt was last seen or heard from on November 26th. KCTV reports that Mallatt texted one of her daughters last Tuesday, that was the day she went missing, saying she was leaving for a few hours, but she never came back. Her aunt, Linda Dively Mallatt, says that she's convinced something happened after Mallatt didn't call her children on Thanksgiving. Now, according to some information we're going to see from the family, there was some times where she would kind of maybe take off for a day or two previously. So it did take the family a little while before they noticed, hey, this one's different, and Thanksgiving comes and goes and she doesn't make contact with her family. I mean, that's certainly enough to raise the alarm. So they do get the missing persons report filed. I think it's 3 days after she actually goes missing. Here's another article at 4State's homepage. Several Southwest Missouri law enforcement agencies are assisting the Bates County Sheriff's Office to locate a missing woman. Members from the Lamar, Nevada, and Butler Police Departments, as well as the Vernon County and Cedar County Sheriff's Offices, are assisting Bates County with the search. The Sheriff's Office has also requested assistance from the Cass County Disaster Emergency Response Team, Digital Investigations, the UAV Unit, and the Bates County Sheriff's Posse to assist with searching the ground and waterways around the residence where Mallatt was last known to be. So it seems like a very big response, a lot of resources that are being called in. And it's one of those cases where I have to say it seems like everyone's doing the right thing in terms of really jumping on it quickly, pulling a lot of resources, doing the right types of searches. Do they find anything? Let's continue with some more news here at fox4kc.com. We're nervous, sick to our stomachs because we don't know where she is, said Tina Nowak, Mallatt's aunt. Several of Mallatt's relatives arrived in Butler on Tuesday, passing out flyers of the missing 36-year-old. Hopefully she didn't get a ride with somebody and they took off with her, or with all the other stuff going on in this world, you just never know anymore, Nowak said. The Southwest Major Case Squad have been canvassing the area around a 240-acre farm Mallatt shares with her boyfriend and 4 children. Tuesday morning, we started a ground search with drones, water boats, and volunteers, said Sheriff Chad Anderson, standing near an empty field near Mallatt's home. The scene behind me, we found an article of clothing. We're not sure whose it is or where it belongs. Unfortunately, that's the only description we get. We don't know what type of article of clothing this is. Investigators haven't found anything in their search that leads them to believe that foul play is involved at this time, according to Anderson. He added that those who know Mallatt are cooperating with their investigation, including her ex-husband, who was the last known person to speak with her. So it seems like the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, she decides that she's going to go out, I think it's around 7:30 p.m., and apparently go to play pool. And it seems like possibly she's playing pool with her ex-husband. The story, at least that I've been able to kind of put together from all these different news sources, is the ex-husband then brings her home. Unfortunately, we don't have any time frame on that. I'm seeing some differences in terms of, does he actually drive up to her house and drop her off at her house on the farm? Or there's this other version where it seems like he drops her off at the road that leads to her farm. Something between those two differences. But quite honestly, this is one of those cases where I'm just wondering why law enforcement isn't releasing some of those details to kind of help them. I mean, you've got a pretty small community here. I've had some experience with small communities. People know each other's business pretty strongly in communities like that. So if they would release kind of a better timeline of what's going on here, we know she left home at 7:30. How did she get where she was going? Did someone come and pick her up? How long were they at wherever they were playing pool? Where were they playing pool? Because it might be important for other people. Like if this was in a bar or something like that, what if she was arguing with her ex-husband the whole time? No one would know to even think about that because we have no idea where they were even playing pool, at least from the information that's been released. But then a really key piece is, what time did he bring her back? Even if we can't get a firm determination if he dropped her off on the road or dropped her off right at her front door, are we talking 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, 1 in the morning? That kind of information might become important also for people that are looking into this, because if it's 1 in the morning, her boyfriend of 18 years has been waiting for her, maybe didn't know where she was going or something like that. Could that have provoked some type of issue between them that might be a factor in this as well? So lack of a basic timeline, I don't know why we're having that with this case, but it's very clear the search efforts are really banked around the farm. Everything is focusing at the farm. So do they have a good reason for that? Let's continue with some more information over at kmbc.com. It's not good. Something is definitely wrong, said Bill Tillery, the family's closest neighbor. Dive teams, boats, drones, and canines searched along the water by the property. So we do have a river that's going through here, and it does look like it's a pretty decent water source. But it sounds like they're using sonar. They've got boats out. They're doing searches along the edge. So once again, I'm hearing all the right things in terms of what should happen in a case like this. This other point up here is marked because some of the news articles are saying that some of the searches focused around this area. I don't know if it's really key to this or not, and it's hard to really know because I don't know where the borders for the farm are. We're hoping that she maybe just ran off to somebody's house and is just, maybe for lack of a better term, she's checked out for a day or two, Sheriff Anderson said. And if you guys are like me, reading a comment like that about a case like this, it's like you want to grab someone by their shoulders and shake them and say, no, this, get on this. There's something else that's going on with this case. But we have to remember the realities of missing persons reports. For the vast majority of the reports that are called in, what he's talking about usually pays off. So it's kind of hard to be super critical about a comment like that when you know that most of these people within a few days will actually be found. Unfortunately, we don't have that with this particular case. Another article at KMBC, the Bates County Sheriff has taped off both sides of one section of a body of water just across the street from the house where Nicole Mallatt, 36, lived. Dive teams searched the waterway, and the sheriff's office hasn't shared any information since finding a piece of clothing on Tuesday. Mallatt's 4 children are between 11 and 17 years old. They were the last to see or hear from her on November 26th when she said she was going to play pool with a friend. People close to the family said it's not unusual for Mallatt to leave for periods of time, but that in the past, she had always stayed in contact. Now, one of the things that's interesting that's in one of the video packages, I can't remember which one, but there's a family member that says when she would take off for a period of time, usually her long-term boyfriend would call the family to ask, hey, have you seen her? And in this particular instance, when she went missing, that did not happen. So I can tell you, it seems like the family is pretty critical of the boyfriend. It seems like there's some accusations that are flying in his direction, at least from what I see on his Facebook profile as well. Is it really fair or not? I don't know, but let's continue, and we'll talk about it by the end of all this. From December 5th, 2019, and I'm telling you guys, most of these articles are just really within that first week. There is just so much that's happening in that first week. The search continues near Butler. Police consider her disappearance suspicious. On Thursday, the Bates County Sheriff Chad Anderson gave an update on the search and revealed that they have found her phone, backpack, and shoes. Now, when you hear backpack, you're probably thinking, that sounds like maybe she was trying to take off for a little bit. At least from information I'm seeing from her family, they're stating that her backpack was her purse. And in the backpack, they do find her wallet, they find her driver's license. So for someone that's trying to take off, I don't know if this is really a way that you're going to do it. You're going to leave your backpack behind. You're going to leave your cell phone behind. Cell phone maybe, because I know some people are worried about being tracked. But your backpack that has your purse, or it is your purse, has your wallet, has your driver's license, like, what are you going to expect to do if you're going to go try to restart your life somewhere? Are you going to try to whip up a new fake identity or something? Like, there's some big problems with the items that they've just found here. And I do appreciate that I can see their statement is shifting. Before they're like, hey, there's no sign of foul play. Now they're at least saying the disappearance is suspicious. But is that enough when you've found these items? And in particular, when the items were found less than a quarter mile away from her home. Now, that raises some interesting points for me. And once again, I don't know if the family's focus on her current boyfriend is the right way to look at it, or to be more focused on the ex-husband, because we know he's the last person to be with her. If something did happen, and he got rid of her in some way, and he wanted to throw police off, wouldn't it be kind of a smart move to get those items back near her house, and then that way all their focus is going to go in that direction? Now, from what the sheriff is saying, both the men are cooperating. But really, in cases like this, you got to look at the stats. If this is a homicide and they just don't know about it yet, the likelihood that she was killed by someone that she's very close to is extremely high. We're talking just about as high as that same stat of, hey, we'll wait a couple days and the missing person will show back up. So there's this is problematic for me in a few ways. We also don't have a great description on where the items are found, but it is apparently very close to the property. By some descriptions, I'm hearing 100 yards away from the property line, but he also says within a quarter of a mile from where her actual house is. Mallatt's family told KCTV5 News that they suspect foul play was a factor. Aunts and cousins from all over the state of Missouri traveled to Bates County to search for Mallatt and pass out flyers all over the region. The family says Mallatt also texted his sister-in-law asking if she could stay at her house, but she never showed up. If you did watch the domestic violence discussion that we had on Brainscratch a couple weeks ago, you would have heard that the biggest time in terms of risk factor for a homicide or an attack from an intimate partner is when you're trying to leave. So if she was really putting a plan into play that she was actually going to leave that boyfriend, the risk factor just all of a sudden shoots right through the roof there. And we're hearing from a family member here, yeah, she was asking if she could actually stay over at my house on the day that she went missing. And then we've got this thing where she's meeting up with her ex-husband. That could be something as simple as it appears that one of the children is from a previous relationship. I don't know if it's from her ex-husband in particular, but if they're co-parenting, maybe it's a normal thing for them to meet up. And I don't know that her going to play pool is actually meeting up with him in particular to play pool. It's tough, guys, because I've got all these little pieces of the story, but no one is really doing a great job of tying these things together, despite the fact that local media is doing a very good job of raising exposure and pushing a lot out. It's just a lot of these separate little pieces and nothing to really pull them together. I'm doing my best with it. Mallatt was last seen late Tuesday night, so we don't know what time, on a gravel road. Law enforcement is still searching the more than 240 acres of farmland surrounding her home. So this is kind of the description that leads me to believe that, once again, he didn't take her right up to, it wasn't, from the door of his car to the door of her house. It sounds like he dropped her off at a road that possibly led to her house. We've searched the property, the river, the bodies of water along the property, on the property with boats, with sonar. We have drones flying over, volunteers searching the property. Chad Anderson with the Bates County Sheriff said. Anderson says Mallatt was last seen by her ex-husband, who says he picked her up. Okay, so we know that he did actually pick her up and dropped her off near the home where she lived with her boyfriend. So it doesn't sound like he dropped her off at the home, but near it. I'd also be curious to know how close to the drop-off point where he says he dropped her off were the items of hers found. And then on top of that, I'd be curious to know if law enforcement has actually checked cell phone activity for her phone and his phone. They should match up because theoretically he drops her off, but I'm curious, I don't know in that type of area, like would her GPS be working that great? But was there a period of time where you can see that he left in his vehicle, but she was still continuing to walk in a direction? Or does it look like the vehicle stopped there, her phone drops, stops at a location, and doesn't move after that? I think that would be really, really important to know in a case like this. And I'm really hopeful that investigators are considering things like that. Another article over at kmbc.com. This is a picture of her mother. She's very tore up with all this. The family says the backpack found was Mallatt's purse. It had her wallet, cell phone, and driver's license. The items were found within 100 yards of her home. Now, I don't know if they're talking about the building of her home or if they're talking about the land of her home here. The other information I gave you came from the sheriff, but even he seems kind of strange on the details. One of the reporters was asking him for details about the cell phone, like was it damaged, was it broken, what kind of status was it in, and he couldn't even really answer that because he says that he didn't know and he wasn't the one that found it and he didn't see it. She's a good person. She's a beautiful girl, loves her kids to death, would do anything for them. She just wants to be a family. That's all she wanted to be, was a family. And I think they just took that all away from her, Lewis said. Her family said Mallatt had reached out to several family members concerned about her safety. She would call me and say, "Mama, I got to get out of here. I'm going to end up dead if I don't." And she wanted to come to my house a couple weeks ago, but she said she couldn't leave her babies, Lewis said. So if that's true, and we're also hearing from her sister-in-law that she supposedly wanted to go stay at her house on that night, we now have some indicators that she might have been planning to try to get out of that relationship around this time. The sheriff's office said there's no evidence of foul play at the home, and they did search the home. They did get a warrant. They had crime scene processors go through the house. It sounds like they didn't find anything. But quite honestly, even if they did, I don't think they would come out with that publicly. If they are trying to put a case together, they probably wouldn't want to splash those details all around. But the family said there were frequent arguments. I think it got out of hand, and I think Nicole is probably dead by now, her mother said. Why haven't they found her? Let's get a little more detail about what the home life is like. At fox4kc.com, the sheriff says Mallatt has been living with a boyfriend for the last 18 years, and the two have 3 children together. Mallatt's family claims she's been a victim of domestic violence at the hands of her boyfriend, but the sheriff says the boyfriend has been cooperating in the investigation. I keep seeing that comment thrown around that, hey, the boyfriend's cooperating, the ex-husband's cooperating. It's almost like media is looking at that as a very simple, well, they must be innocent, they're cooperating. I think there's a very strong chance that someone that is cooperating with this investigation might actually be involved in what happened to her. Just because they're cooperating doesn't mean that they're being honest with you, doesn't mean that you can rely on the information that you're getting from them. If you look into how some of these people are kind of emotionally made up, sometimes they actually like manipulating others, and that might be a factor with a case like this. So I wouldn't necessarily write off anybody that's cooperating with this investigation. We've got a small town, rural area. You've only got so many people that could be having a hand in this. And I know the family's worried about some situation where some stranger came along to give her a ride or something like that. She's that close to home, and you're talking about a rural area like that where you've only got a few hundred people that are living within miles. What are the odds that some random person is just going to come driving by and, hey, do you need a ride up the gravel road that you live on? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but there might be a situation, and this is why I really feel like a better timeline should be released. There might be a situation where, like, imagine that they were playing pool at a bar and maybe there was someone that was kind of all of a sudden started stalking her or something like that, wanted to follow her home. There might be something like that that's at play here, but because we don't have any information, we can't really even drive into that too much. And we can't ask the public to help remember things like that because we don't even have the basics of, hey, where were they on this evening where they supposedly went? Not to mention, just from an investigative standpoint, you know, is law enforcement able to validate the ex-husband's story? Yes, we went to this particular place. We played pool for 2 hours. Are there cameras there? Do they have footage? Can they see that they actually showed up together, that they left together? Did it look like they were okay while they were there? No arguments that were going on or anything like that? There's just a huge amount of detail that's missing from this. It feels to me like law enforcement really wants to keep this in this box of it's only a missing persons case. And I don't know if they're being very realistic about the risk factors that are going on with this case and the likelihood that it's actually an unidentified homicide. That's at least my fear looking into all this, and I'm sure the family's feeling that as well. I thought finding her phone would help us out a lot, says Mark Willie, Mallatt's brother. If we found her phone, we could get some information about who has seen who talked to who last, We are hoping that comes to light today. I'm hoping so too, but with some things, if it's person-to-person contact, it's not going to be on the phone. And if it comes down to, if we are looking at this like a homicide, we've got two main persons of interest right now, and she could be interfacing with them face to face. So I don't know that the phone's really going to help out. Like I said, there's other things I would look at with the phone though. Does it move on its own after that ex-husband's phone takes off from the area? That's a very big question. Mallatt also has a former husband who lives in the area where she was last seen. The sheriff says he too has been cooperating in the investigation. This is still considered a missing persons case because Mallatt's family has told the sheriff she has a history of occasionally dropping off the radar. There is, and admittedly, we're looking at this case through a very narrow lens. Most of these articles are within just the start of December, but it really seems like law enforcement keeps putting this out. This is a missing persons case. We can't assume more than that. Media is just really echoing that. Hey, they keep telling us this is just a missing persons case. We can't assume more than that. It really seems to me like this should be looked at for the possibility that there is more going on. Her family says missing a major holiday like Thanksgiving without anyone knowing her whereabouts has raised red flags. And of course, they should know best. Her mother says her daughter had plans for Thanksgiving. This is over at kshb.com. We talked about Thanksgiving. She called me for recipes and stuff. She was going to have this dinner for her kids. They were going to help mom cook, Lewis said through tears. Mallatt's home was also searched and is being processed by the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department Crime Lab. Anderson said authorities plan to continue the ground search, though there is no longer an indication the search will provide evidence of her whereabouts. And over at KCTV 5 News, here's another example of what I'm talking about. Nicole Mallatt, 36, has been missing now for 9 days, and her family is beside themselves. The Bates County Sheriff's Office is still treating her disappearance as a missing persons case. They are not calling it a homicide investigation, and that gives her family hope. However, they still fear the worst after some important items were found on Thursday. Sheriff Anderson makes an interesting comment I want to share with you guys here and talk about a little bit.
Just because we have found those articles does not necessarily mean that there's foul play. It is suspicious in nature, but we are still trying to determine whether or not that was left there in a determination to get us not to be looking for her elsewhere.
I find that comment pretty interesting, and I'm wondering if it is one of two things. Either, number one, does he think that was something she had done so that she could try to disappear, that leaving her items behind like that would make everyone search there, and then she could kind of hightail it out of there, which I suppose is a possibility. It seems a little strange to me that she would necessarily need to kind of smoke screen the sheriffs like that. I mean, if this was a domestic violence escape situation, she could just tell them, I don't know why someone would take those steps in particular. Or is he speaking to the fact that maybe someone had done something to her and then came back and dropped those items close to the home to kind of throw off the investigation and make people look in that direction? And that I'm definitely wrestling with. But I get the sense here, and admittedly, this is from December 5th, so this is kind of early in the investigation, but they don't want to go down the road of this being a homicide. It's clear for these 2 weeks, even after they find these items, they just do not really want to consider that. And I'm not sure why, and I don't know why we're sitting here months later and we're not seeing any news developments about the investigation changing. I mean, I would think at this point in time, they should finally say, okay, hey, we know it's been a really long time and maybe we should be looking at this a little bit different. But quite honestly, the media on this case, it's all over the place for the first few weeks in December and then almost completely dries up. There's one article that comes out in February and that is it. But here's another one over at KSHB. This is from December 6th. Late Friday afternoon, the Missouri State Highway Patrol issued a statewide endangered person advisory for Mallatt on behalf of the Bates County Sheriff's Office. According to the advisory, Mallatt has suicidal ideations. I don't know where that information is coming from. There's a pretty substantial amount of press around this case. I have not seen any comments to support that. I've seen none of the other agencies even really echoing this. So I don't know where that information is coming from. And just on the pieces that I'm hearing about her having plans for Thanksgiving that's coming up, her seemingly trying to better her life or possibly get out of a domestic violence situation, speaking to her mother a few weeks before, speaking to her sister-in-law literally on that same day. I don't know that we have very strong indicators here for something else where she would want to end her own life. And she goes out with her ex-husband, and then, oh, that's what, my big last hurrah. Like, it's kind of defying logic for me here a little bit, and I really don't know how that even gets out. It's a close-knit community, and it's shaking us all, said Rochelle Mallatt, a friend of Nicole's who has no relation to her. Rochelle has known Nicole for 20 years. She was one of the searchers trudging through the woods. Nicole Mallatt left her house around 7:40 p.m. on November 26th. According to her family, she was with her ex-husband. The Bates County Sheriff's Office has not said if she ever came back home. That's a pretty interesting distinction because we really don't have anything to say that she didn't make it back home. Once again, I would just really love to see some information from that cell phone to see if it can actually track her movements a little more there. With this case here, there's just some things that aren't adding up and hasn't happened in the past with her. And so we want to make sure we have some answers for her family and her children, Sheriff Chad Anderson said. This is very scary. It's awful cold to be running around out here with no shoes on, Rochelle Mallatt said. We have been told that she had a backpack, so maybe we were in hopes that she was trying to have a little getaway or something, but without the backpack, it just makes you wonder. And of course, we have her family saying the backpack is just her purse, that's not about a getaway effort or something like that. For the temperatures in that area at that time, it looks like the highs were in the mid 60s and the lows on November 26th were about 38 degrees. The following day down to 33, and it actually just gets colder and colder from there. And of course, you're going to need your shoes. I guess there is the possibility that they aren't the same shoes that she was actually wearing. We didn't get a really good description of the shoes in the NamUs profile or any of the posters or anything that I've seen. Maybe she had two pairs of shoes. I don't know, but there's so many things about this case that just don't seem to add up. Over at KSHB from December 7th, after some of her belongings were found earlier this week, friends and family of Nicole Mallatt gathered for a candlelight vigil. Her mother said she's hopeful for the best possible outcome, but also is preparing for the worst. She said, "I know she's not alive. I just know she's not. I feel it in my heart." While the search continues for Mallatt, her family is asking everyone to look around and speak up. Check your surroundings for Nicole. Let us know if you see any new burial sites or anything out of the ordinary. So you can see from the comments, her mother is being very direct about the possibility that they think that they're looking for her body. And here's the article from February. I mean, basically the news just dries up. December, the rest of December, there's nothing for late December. There's absolutely nothing in January. And then February 11th, we hear about another search. Mallatt's family will conduct a search on February 15th and 16th. Volunteers will meet at the Walmart in Butler. The search will focus on the area where Mallatt was last seen, not too far from her home off County Road 3508 in rural Bates County. But we don't get any updates after that, so I don't know that search actually produced anything. And interestingly, that seems to be a family search. That doesn't seem like a law enforcement-based search. So I don't know what's going on with the investigation. Doesn't seem like we're getting any more comments from the sheriff, new details that might help stir up tips for them, nothing. So if the national average for homicides is 5 for every 100,000 people, and you're talking about an area where you've only got a few thousand people, well, if we look at the Bates County, we'll just take that as a whole. The sheriff says that they are protecting approximately 16,000 citizens there. So maybe one homicide would actually kind of get them at least close to the national average. I did just some quick searching into murder for that area, and it doesn't seem to happen too often out there at all. The type of stuff I'm seeing is like, oh, a case from the 80s and, a murder-suicide situation that happened in the 90s and things like that. So I'm worried that they're not looking at it in that direction just because they're really not used to having something like that happen in that area. On Web Sleuths, there's a member there that says they have lived around that area and that the old moniker used to be, hey, if you want to get away with a murder, this is a great place to do it. And some of the stuff that I'm seeing from some of those older cases, it's making me wonder. It's making me wonder about the effectiveness of prosecuting a homicide in that area. The truth of the matter is you don't have to have a body in every case. There are cases that are won with no body. So let's take a look at just a little research. This is actually something that's been put out by the FBI. And of course, in a no-body homicide, you're really talking about a missing persons case that's finally been shifted into a homicide investigation. The FBI puts out the Law Enforcement Bulletin. This is provided by the FBI Training Division, and they have a particular article here on no-body homicide cases, a practical approach. So let's learn a little bit about this and see, does Nicole's case kind of fit into some of these conditions? And if so, is there something the sheriff could be doing to kind of shift and maybe change this investigation? Every day, people file reports on approximately 1,740 missing Americans, both children and adults. About 70% of all reported missing persons are found or voluntarily returned within 48 to 72 hours. Not all individuals indicated as missing are victims of kidnapping, murder, or some other criminal act. However, each account represents the concern of someone reporting a person who disappeared. Of course, that's such a big reason why I do this show every week. The missing persons case is not just about the missing person. It's about the hole that they leave with their friends, their family, their coworkers. It affects a lot of people. A variety of reasons, mental illness, depression, substance abuse, credit problems, abusive relationships, or marital discord exist for why people voluntarily disappear. Due to the other high number of missing person reports assigned to criminal investigators and the vast quantity of cases resolving themselves, investigators tend to, quote, wait and see, or prioritize a case lower than an identified crime. Often, no one submits requests for electronic data or captures timely eyewitness interviews and victimology. Consequently, timelines become vague and memories fade. We don't even have enough detail about this case to know if that's really coming into play here or not. We know we've got two persons of interest, basically, from the articles that we're looking at, but that might not be accurate. If we did know where they went to that night, if there was other people involved, or maybe even through her social media, they see that she's speaking to some people or planning on meeting up with some people or something like that. It could really change the scope of this investigation. And if they're not speaking to some people that may be harder to identify than just the standard, who was she living with and, who's the guy that drove her home, maybe they are missing a piece here in terms of the investigation. When facts and circumstances indicate a strong possibility of foul play or the disappearance occurs due to criminal action, investigators should consider the missing person case as a potential homicide. There's something else. Sheriff Anderson was asked by a reporter if they knew if there was any domestic violence going on, and he wouldn't answer that question directly. It's curious to me because I think most of those records should be public knowledge. So I don't know why that might have not been kind of worked out by a good investigative journalist in the area, just going and seeing if they could find those records for themselves. But I also don't know why the sheriff isn't being very upfront about that. Is he worried about how it would look if he goes, oh yeah, we've got 3 complaints from her just in the past year? I don't know. I'm kind of curious about that aspect. A no-body homicide often begins as a missing person case. The amount and variety of electronic information results in a limited shelf life before becoming lost forever. Investigators must make the effort as soon as possible to preserve, freeze, capture, and gather this information, which once again is just making me ask, why don't we have a good timeline? Why don't we know the locations that they were at? That might prompt someone in the public that goes, hey, the camera on my farm faces that direction. It should see if a vehicle was driving by at that time. Let me go get that footage and get it over to the police. It's really one of those cases where I feel like public might be able to help law enforcement with this, but law enforcement isn't putting out the right questions or information to actually elicit those tips. I'm very concerned with that in this case. When an investigator suspects foul play, the missing person investigation needs to focus on capturing the victim's routine activities. Another thing that we really don't have here, I was even having trouble just kind of getting a good gist of Nicole's life. Is she a stay-at-home mom? Does she work? I mean, obviously they've got this farm, or that they're using that. Does she work on the farm all day? Like, what is the norm of her life? I still don't know. Investigators should identify the victim's actions prior to the disappearance. Relationally, this may include individuals the victim recently had contact with, the last known sightings of the missing person, latest conversations, topics discussed, and the victim's mindset. These events also consist of the missing person's future itinerary or plans, such as appointments, goals and expectations, upcoming celebrations, or impending tasks. Electronically, the person's latest texts, messages, postings, photographs, internet searches, or voicemails indicate both routine and unexpected events. Obviously, a lot to consider there, but if you really don't take this down that road of, hey, I should be thinking about this as a homicide investigation, maybe some of those pieces don't get processed. Emotionally significant items like a cell phone, a purse or wallet being left behind often indicate an unplanned departure. Abandoning financial assets or personal records, and they specifically cite driver's license here, to start a new life makes no sense. I almost want to end the sentence right there, but there's a condition. Makes no sense if the individual left deliberately and voluntarily. So just from what this is saying here, it's being very clear that if you find these particular items, they're talking about a cell phone, purse or wallet, and there's more than this. I'm just pointing out the things that line up with this case. Cell phone, purse, driver's license. This is not a way that you disappear to go start a new life by leaving these items behind. So I don't think, kind of assuming that that's what's going on in this case is probably a very strong position, at least according to this information that's being put out by the FBI. By identifying sudden disruptions in the missing person's normal routine that have no plausible explanation, investigators can prove the negative. The victim did not plan the departure, and consequently, the disappearance may be the result of a criminal act or other endangerment. I think this case rings that bell all day long. Don't look to prove this is definitely a homicide. Look, we have a body. Prove the negative. There's no way that she went off to go start her own life when she doesn't have any money. She didn't take anything. She's got no vehicle, didn't even take her driver's license, cell phones left behind, purses left behind. There's nothing to support that she has left of her own accord here. When individuals leave behind people they love, valuable items, beloved pets, important electronic devices, secure shelter, favorite clothing, and their money, something is amiss. You'll hear it from her family time and time again. She left the kids behind. Even the quote we got from her mom, she wouldn't leave to go live with her mother because she couldn't leave her children in that situation. But then she's going to decide that she's going to take off a couple days later after she goes to play pool and, gets a ride home from her ex-husband. It's not lining up. When investigators suspect criminal activity, it becomes critical to conduct a dual investigation with hope for a live recovery, but with a perspective that the victim may possibly be deceased. And I have seen other cases where law enforcement will be very clear that that's what they're doing. That might be happening here and they're just not being clear about it. But I do think it helps when you're publicly clear about that because once again, it shifts the public into a different mode of trying to help you. And especially if you give them the right details where they can kind of bounce back and say, yeah, no, I can support that part of the story, or no, I've got proof to tell you that what you heard here is actually wrong. So yeah, I have seen cases where they specifically say, we're running this as a dual investigation now. Might be a missing persons case, but we're also treating it as a homicide investigation. Once investigators make the decision to conduct a homicide investigation, investigating circumstances leading up to the disappearance emerge as critical to the case. Sometimes what appears on the surface as a perfect, harmonious domestic situation, in reality, equates to an abusive relationship. Understanding the missing person's background often exposes truths known only to the offender and the victim. A no-body homicide prosecution seems similar to other murder prosecutions, except the prosecutor must demonstrate the likelihood that the victim is no longer alive. This often proves a difficult, but not impossible, prosecutorial challenge. The body itself provides the best evidence of an unlawful death. However, other ways exist to determine that a person died. Many homicide prosecutors often base their cases on circumstantial evidence. They must establish 1, that the victim died, 2, that the person was murdered, 3, the approximate time of death, 4, that the likely location of the crime is within the prosecutor's jurisdiction, and 5, the person responsible for the murder. In one particular case, the judge determined that the fact that a murderer may successfully dispose of a victim's body does not entitle the offender to an acquittal. I really love that quote, and I wish that they would run that through all the police departments that are dealing with cases like this. Just because someone might be able to get away with hiding a body doesn't mean that they should get away with homicide. Conclusion, the body itself serves as the best evidence of an unlawful death. However, other ways exist to establish that the person died or was murdered. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit 4 created a no-body homicide database and a no-body homicide monolith. BAU-4 personnel are available to assist law enforcement agencies in several ways with such cases. I kind of jumped over it because I don't want to dive into this too much, but essentially, there's already a method for how you can process cases like this, and the FBI will help you, and they'll also get you in touch with experts that have done this before. There is a way to take a case like we're talking about with Nicole's here and run charges on that. And if nothing else, I hope maybe Sheriff Anderson will happen to see this video and maybe a little spark will light there. Reach out to them. See if there's something here. The conditions that you're talking about, I don't know. They sure seem like we're talking about more than just a straight missing persons case. And please get your website fixed. That's what happens when I click on missing persons at their website. Service unavailable. And I really hope the family doesn't feel like that's exactly what's happening in this case. Of course, everything that we've reviewed on today's episode will be in the sources down below, and there's contact information there. If you have information that can help Bates County Sheriff's Department with this, please contact them, get that information in, and help this family find the answers that they're looking for. Before I end today's video, I want to thank several new patrons, starting with Lauren Johnson, Sandy M. Reed, Alexandra Grace, and Susie Hemman. Thank you so much. If you'd like to support the channel, please head to www.lordandarts.com. You can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, or buy merchandise. It all helps keep me here doing what I love doing, trying to help these families in these terrible situations, and of course, spending time with you. Take care, everyone. I'll see you back here on Friday with a brand new episode of Brainscratch on the Lord and Arts channel.